Hello, my name's Ollie Jay. I'm Professor of Heat and Health and Director of the Heat and Health Research Incubator in the Faculty of Medicine and Health at the University of Sydney. Hot weather can affect everybody's health. The main way in which we try to defend our body from getting too hot is by redistributing blood towards the skin surface to support heat loss. And this places an enormous amount of extra strain on the heart. So if you have an underlying heart problem, that can lead to a heat-related cardiovascular event. And this can happen in the absence of being too hot inside the body. The way in which we defend body temperature is through sweating. And we can lose up to 1 liter of sweat per hour through sweating. And if those lost fluids are not replenished, by drinking extra water, then we can have progressive dehydration, which can then worsen the risk of heat-related illnesses. And that's why it's really important to think about the way in which the heat affects the human body, and it's really important to be prepared for extreme heat and hot weather. Heat exhaustion is when body temperature rises above normal levels. It's really important to keep an eye out for the early signs and symptoms of heat exhaustion before it develops into something more sinister. So the type of things that we should be keeping an eye out for are when we feel excessively thirsty, if you're starting to feel dizzy, and also if you're feeling nauseous. These are the early signs and symptoms of heat-related illness. Heat exhaustion, if left untreated, can develop into something called heat stroke. And we should make no mistake that heat stroke is a medical emergency. The type of signs of heat stroke is where somebody might lose consciousness and fall into a coma, and also have the same signs and symptoms that they experienced when they were experiencing heat exhaustion. Rapid treatment of somebody suspected of having heat stroke is absolutely essential to ensure their chances of survival. This means recognizing heat stroke. So if somebody loses consciousness while they're exposed to extreme heat, and that's accompanied by high body temperature or delirium if they're still conscious, then they need to be treated immediately with rapid and aggressive cooling. It's important to keep in mind that everybody can be at risk during hot weather, but the things that make us most vulnerable are a combination of our physiology and the type of settings that we find ourselves in. Physiologically, people who are older have a reduced ability to sweat and therefore keep cool, and they are therefore at a higher risk on a hot day. Babies and very young children are at a disadvantage as well because they are less able to keep their body cool. People on certain types of medications may also have a reduced ability to keep their body temperature in check through sweating. Trying to understand how hot it's going to be on a given day can be quite tricky. So when you're looking at the weather forecast, here's a few things to keep in mind. The temperature that you're seeing is measured in the shade. And if it's a very high humidity with that temperature, it's going to impact your body in a much greater way. So your risk of heat-related illness is going to be higher. If it's windy, that helps cool the body even at the same temperature. And if it's cloudy or you're going to be out in the sun, the temperature that you're going to be exposed to is going to be about 12 to 15 degrees Celsius higher. When you're planning your activities on a day like that, think about limiting your physical activity to cooler parts of the day and always remaining in the shade as much as possible. Here are some evidence-based tips on how to keep cool on a hot day. If you have air conditioning, of course, you should use it. But a lot of people, because of their job or the circumstances that they find themselves in, don't have access to air conditioning. So in those circumstances, you can think about using low-cost personal level cooling strategies. You can use an electric fan, but please don't use a fan above 40 degrees Celsius because it will accelerate the rate at which your body heats up rather than cool it down. You can apply water to the skin surface using wet clothing, a flannel or a sponge or a spray, and that helps support evaporative heat loss, and that will reduce your body temperature quite effectively. You can immerse your feet in a bucket of cold water your feet act like radiators, and that helps dump a lot of body heat away from inside your core. Wear light, loose-fitting clothing, particularly if you're outside. The color should be white or reflective. Here are some tips on how to keep cool if you're outdoors on a hot day. Make sure that you limit your vigorous physical activities to the cooler parts of the day. Take extra rest breaks. And also, if you have access to a misting fan, this is a really effective way of keeping yourself and others cool in an outdoor environment. On a hot day, here are some tips on how to keep your home as cool as possible. If you have blinds, you should shut them to prevent direct sunlight coming into your home, which will heat up the temperature inside your house. If you have windows that you can open, then you should only open them if the air inside your house is hotter than it is outdoors. At all times, make sure that you have a fan available to help circulate the air inside your home to keep you cool. That is, unless it's 40 degrees Celsius or higher. Consider using a fan-first cooling strategy. This is where you use an electric fan to circulate the air inside your home. It makes the temperature of that air feel about 4 degrees Celsius cooler. What you can do is then set your air conditioner to turn on to cool at 27 degrees Celsius instead of a lower temperature, and you end up using the air conditioner far less throughout the day. Importantly, you'll feel just as cool and comfortable, but you'll have a much smaller electricity bill at the end of the summer. If you have to be outside on a hot day because of your job or the sport that you're playing, here's a few things that you need to keep in mind. If you can reschedule those activities to cooler parts of the day, that'll really help. If that's not an option, then try to take more breaks. Remaining hydrated is really important because we lose a lot of fluid from our body through sweating, up to 1 liter extra per hour on a hot day, particularly if we're physically active and outdoors. It's really important to make sure that we replenish those lost fluids from sweating, but we'll be dehydrated before we start feeling thirsty. So it's important to make sure that you're taking on extra fluids before you start to feel that urge to drink.